spider can. Spins a web any size. Catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud. He's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man. In the chill of night.
Part-time fanboy.
Part-time fanboy doing my thing.
Oh yeah, doing part-time. Oh yeah, doing part-time. Oh yeah, doing part-time. Oh yeah, doing part-time. Parttimefanboy.com.
Okay, so, well, this is Part-Time Fanboy, and I am Kristian Horn, and I'm here with my pal Corey Blake, and we are here this week. Well, have you seen Amazing Spider-Man 2 yet? Or
I have not.
neither have I. Do you plan on seeing it?
Maybe at some point before I die.
Yeah. I'm feeling the same way. I was not. It's not something that I'm rushing to get out to see. As a matter of fact, the trailers for me really make it look like it's a rental, or if that on like a cable, like, oh, it happens to be on, I'll watch it, sort of thing.
I mean, I'm curious because it's gotten mixed reviews. I mean, I can't say it's universally hated or anything like that.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, at least I don't know. Maybe I've seen a very biased subset of people, but
You mean comic fans?
yeah.
No.
But yeah, I mean, you know, obviously there are people who hate it, but then there's people who are like, it wasn't very good, but it had this, you know, like there were sort of, you know, there are these things that worked and these things that didn't, and so, you know, it wasn't like, why does cinema exist?
Yeah. No, I mean, and no superhero movie is ever going to be that, I don't think, you know. Yeah, to me, it just had a Batman and Robin vibe written all over it. And I was, you know, once you start piling on the supervillains, I was just like, yeah, I don't think this is going to be for me. You know what I mean?
I think the best part of I think I might have said this on one of your Facebook threads or something, but I think the best part about the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies is Andrew Garfield's press promoting the movie.
You think so, huh?
Yeah, like he's like singing the theme song on Conan or whatever.
Oh,
Jimmy
that's
Fallon,
right.
whatever.
I heard about that. Yeah.
You know, or he's saying, you know, well, why couldn't Spider-Man be black or gay or whatever he said? And
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's like it seems like every movie he says something that's kind of like, okay, you're interesting. You know.
Yeah. Don't be a dick, I guess, is kind of like the one big thing. You know, I mean, those are all great to like get attention, but you know that it rankles like the fans' nerves when he starts talking like that.
Of course, yeah.
You know what I mean. He's just trying to get attention, and I mean, I do know that like what was it the year before, like at Comic-Con, didn't he go up to the microphone like in Spider-Man costume to ask a question at the panel? And then he like took his mask off, and it was like him, and yeah. That's a pretty neat stunt. That is good. What'd you think of the first Amazing Spider-Man?
I didn't see it.
Oh, you did not? You haven't seen it at all?
No, I didn't.
You have a will of iron.
I do.
You do.
It just felt too soon from the last set of movies.
Too soon, yeah.
And too disrespectful from the memory of Spider-Man 3.
Disrespectful. Yeah.
No. I just felt like, did we need the origin again? Didn't we already do this?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think I will see those movies eventually. You know, I'm sure I will. But I just, I don't know. I didn't feel a need. I think there's sort of an unfair, you know, and I'll admit to this, an unfair bias against any Marvel superhero movie that's not from Marvel Studios.
Yeah, but doesn't Marvel have some involvement at the very least, or are they just marginal at this point? Like, don't they have some say in it?
I don't know. I don't think they really do. I mean,
really?
They may get to consult, but I don't think. I mean, they have a license. Those other studios have their licenses until they either expire or they don't make a movie in time. So yeah, I think those are like leftover deals from pre-Marvel Studios days.
Yeah, but but the Marvel logo is like up front, like the same thing with isn't it the X-Men movies, like the Wolverine movies? Isn't the Marvel logo like in front of all those, and Amazing Spider-Man too? If I remember correctly.
I guess, yeah. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you're right. Maybe they do have more of a say than I think. But
maybe they don't have a say, but maybe they just have to have their logo. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of it.
Could be just like a production deal kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, talk about some boneheaded studio moves. Those deals that they made for the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, those were kind of not smartly thought out. But, can you imagine, like, what people at Marvel Studios are like, oh, God, I wish we had Spider-Man. Like, the most popular character in their,
their mascot, basically.
Yeah, basically. You're absolutely right. He basically is their mascot. Oh, that's interesting because I mean, I liked the first one, the Sam Raimi one. It had its flaws. I really enjoyed the second one with Dr. Octopus. And the third one was just like, it was just raspberries all over it. It was horrible. It was just like, I couldn't stand it.
Yeah, the first one I so loved when I saw it in the theaters because it's the first time that we saw Spider-Man swinging through the city convincingly.
Yeah.
And I was just so entranced by that I just gave all other flaws.
Yeah.
And then I rewatched it, and it was like, ooh. So
I didn't think it was that bad.
It was okay. It's just there's a lot of acting, or there's a lot of
there's a lot of acting. It's something
problems,
you need in a movie.
A lot of acting problems.
Yeah.
A lot of like character interaction problems and or lack thereof. And then the second movie was definitely the highlight of that trilogy. And the second one I liked, but still there's just some scenes where Peter Parker is in the hospital or whatever and talking to Mary Jane, just like, oh God. It's really terrible.
You don't do well with sentimentality, is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm talking about the acting, which is terrible.
Gosh, I don't remember it that much. I remember part 2, the scene in the subway where he like takes off his mask, or he gets his mask taken off. Yeah. And I was like, come on. That was definitely a big thing with me. I mean, I think that everyone was on that vibe of like, you New Yorkers are honorable and they're great people and they would never, give up Spider-Man's identity. And I was like, okay, I grew up in and around New York City. Yeah, there's always like one prick in the crowd, Right. There's always like one douche who's just going to give up his identity, at the run to J. Jonah Jameson at the Bugle, So for all the, attempts at like making that like a really kind of like choked up scene, there was a part of me in the back of my skull that was like, no, Spider-Man would not take his mask off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that was definitely a sort of a, post 9/11 romantic sort of moment. And yeah, it was kind of sort of
which
overdone.
They had in the first one too, but I felt like they needed to do it at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a really good thing for them to have in there. But like Amazing Spider-Man, I mean, I agree with you. I didn't think they needed a reboot, but it's really funny. It's one of these movies, like I've talked about Batman Begins in the past, where it's like I found the before superhero stuff to be really kind of compelling and interesting and got to me. And then as soon as like, in Batman Begins and as soon as, Amazing Spider-Man, as soon as he puts on the costume, I just became less interested. I just became like, I'm not interested in this at all, which is really funny because so many people, they go to superhero movies and they're like, oh, I hate the origin stories. Those are boring. And to me, it's like that's when the most character development occurs and the more interesting stuff happens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is really where like the heart of the movie and of the characters is kind of established. And I agree with you. It's actually kind of amazing how often that seems to happen. Like I had the same experience with the first Captain America movie. I was loving it, and then he became Captain America, and every fight seemed to feel a little bit more dopey.
Yeah.
It just didn't. I don't know, it's like a different tone or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely felt that.
Yeah, Captain America had that problem of trying to cram all of World War II into 2 hours.
That's
That's
true
sort
too.
of the
Yeah,
biggest problem. It's like
yeah,
once you sort of fall back on montage,
yeah,
as your main sort of like combat sequences. But that like it still is one of my favorite Marvel movies because I just love the heart of it. I was just like, this was just so full of heart. You know what I mean? And just what I needed to see out of a Captain America movie. You know what I mean?
yeah.
The backbone of what he was. It's interesting, but I totally get it. Like, there's definitely so many like. Well, I wouldn't say so many, but there at least those big two examples where Amazing Spider-Man, I was loving it, and then as soon as they, it was just a different take, slightly different tweak, than the previous movies, like where he was a little bit more of sort of like a hipster nerd, kid, as opposed to just like a complete nerd. He skateboarded and he liked girls, and you know what I mean. He wasn't like the complete wallflower, I guess more of a Brian Michael Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man take. But then as soon as the Lizard showed up, I was just like, yeah, I'm kind of bored now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the designs for that and just being so disappointed because it just feels like that character you could have done, even if you didn't go with like the Ditko design, which I obviously would prefer, but
Yeah.
if you didn't go with that, there's so many ways you could have made that character to look interesting. And I just felt like they did like generic, it's like he could have been from 3 other movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you 100%. That was like one of the biggest things was like the just lack of, ingenious design in the villain. If you're not gonna try and make it look like you said, like the Ditko design, then at least do something like mind blowing or just freaky or crazy. And they just didn't do that. It looked like something out of, I don't know what, like Island of Dr. Moreau, the remake or something.
Yeah.
But
Felt like really conservative. It was kind of weird.
Yeah. But I did like what's his face, Andrew Garfield. I mean, I thought, and what I liked about Spider-Man in that movie was that he was kind of like the skinny Spider-Man. You know what I mean? The like really lanky, sort of slim. Where like Tobey Maguire kind of bulked up for it, a little bit. Like Andrew Garfield kind of like, I guess, went the opposite direction and kind of like wrapped himself up in that yoga body or whatever. That like extreme, kind of slim but muscular look. Yeah, I mean, I don't think. Except the third one is horrible. I don't think any of them are like absolutely horrible. But like you said, they're not going to set the cinematic world on fire. And unfortunately, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is not something that's like making me want to get to the theater. You know what I'm saying?
I will say, well, for the third, the Spider-Man 3 might have been the angriest I've ever gotten in theater.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you don't get angry.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. What pissed you off about it?
When he starts like playing the piano or dancing down the street,
Yeah.
I remember I went with some people from work, I think, and I just remember like, and I'm somebody who like I don't eat during the movies. I don't have popcorn. I want no distractions. I'm just watching the movie, and I don't want to look away because I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
But when that happened, I just looked down the aisle at some of my friends, and I was just like aghast. I was like, what movie did this become?
Yeah.
Just happened.
Oh, I got it worse than you. Like when Amazing Spider-Man 3 came out. I mean, not Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man 3 came out. My daughter had probably just been born, or she's probably around like the 6-month, age or something like that, 7 months. She was still a baby, and Amy and I hadn't really been able to go out like on a date because we hadn't been able to find like a sitter that, being paranoid first-time parents, a sitter that, could babysit for Talon. So Amy's older sister came to visit, and she's like, I'll watch the baby and you guys go out. And we're like, okay, let's go see Spider-Man 3 because, we like the first 2. And it was like, yeah, let's go, and sometimes those comic book movies are something that I can get Amy excited about because she tends to like them, And so we went to Spider-Man 3, and I just remember sitting there and like, I think Amy fell asleep. Because you're a parent and you got to deal with a baby. Yeah, just exhausted. And then B, at the end of the movie, we were just like, that was not worth like a sitter, like being away from my baby. Like that was just
Wasted
not
time.
worth it. Yeah, it was just like we could have seen anything. Like and that's the sort of thing that's really funny. Like when you become a parent and you get older and your time doesn't become your own, you start to get like really like almost feeling insulted about like movies that just like are like, fuck you, you fucker. You're just sitting in the seat and now I'm just going to suck up your time. Like I felt that way about Transformers. Like the first Transformers movie, I went out to see that. I think it was opening weekend, like 4th of July with some friends. Amy was like, no, I'll stay home with the baby or whatever. And I came home and I was like, don't ever let me take away time from my child to go see another Michael Bay movie again. I was like, my time is so much better spent with my kid. So yeah. Spider-Man 3 has a special place, I think, in both our hearts at this point.
I think so.
Yeah.
Although since you mentioned Transformers, that too, I think I was already sort of dead inside when I went to go see the first one, and then I never saw it afterward.
What do you mean dead inside? What does that mean?
Well, Transformers was my gateway into comic books, so they are a huge love for me.
Yeah.
Through the '80s cartoon and the Marvel comics from the '80s as well, and so obviously the Michael Bay movies take a rather divergent take on them.
Oh yeah.
At least probably most significantly design wise, where I just think I don't even. I mean, it's just so chaotically designed.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Nalene always is like, feels embarrassed. She's like, I can't tell the characters apart. And then it's like, how can you not? Optimus Prime's a big red one.
Yeah.
But then seeing that movie, I'm like, I don't know what is going on. All I see is a bunch of machinery just jumbling around the screen.
Yeah.
And it was just such a waste. And I was like, I don't need to see any others. That's it.
Yeah, I hear you. I was done. I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Not going to see any others. Well, so now that we've discussed a little bit of our Spider-Man movie-going experience, well, we haven't even talked about, we've talked about it Paul and I think, talked about it in like the top 10 worst superhero movies or, whenever we did that. But we haven't even talked about the Spider-Man TV movies. The less said about those, the better, I think. But I guess, you had emailed all of us a couple of weeks ago. And, since we haven't seen the movie and we don't really plan on it, I thought it would be interesting to do sort of like a book club thing where we look at maybe, a trade or like a collection, once every couple of months or, several weeks, and a couple of us get together and discuss, whatever's out there, a milestone comic book, event or something that maybe we could all get together and read and discuss. So you had read Kraven's Last Hunt several weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And you had you picked up the trade, or did you find original issues, or?
I had the trade, the collection from. I think it's maybe like one of the early versions of the trade, because it's
really?
It's the trade dress is all kind of old and weird, and I think this came out probably in the '80s or early '90s.
Wow, really? Where did you pick that up? Had you just had it lying around?
I think this came out in '90 or '95. This I found in Collector's Paradise, and they're like discount.
Oh, cool.
They're like their clearance or whatever. They have this bin on the side when you walk in.
Yeah.
And so that's where I got that.
Cool. And so what possessed you to pick it up? Because besides the fact that it was in the discount bin.
Yeah, I had heard about it forever.
Yeah.
And I think I remember seeing it on the shelves when I came out, some of the covers. And I definitely remember there being ads for it. And so, but I was not reading, as I mentioned, I was reading Transformers. And so I had not sort of been converted into the superhero world of Marvel. And so I had not read it, heard about it for years. And, and it was like, I don't even remember how much it was. It was at least half off. It might have been more than that. And so I was like, well, what the heck, finally I'll just read this thing and see what the big hoobly-doo is.
The big hoo-ha. Yeah. And before we go on, Collector's Paradise is this really neat store down the street from me. I go there every once in a while. I'm not a regular comic book store, guy, but it's over here, in the valley, like sort of like off of Winnetka and where Sherman Way, I think, meet. I think that those are the cross streets. But yeah, it's a pretty good store, don't you think?
Yeah, I've been there a few times. My new job sort of takes me by there a little bit closer. I'd never been able to check it out before.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's literally within walking distance of where I live right now. So, yeah, I mean, I'll go down there every once in a while. It's never been like my regular comic book store because I think I was kind of petering out, like when I first realized that they were there, like as far as like picking up regular issues. But it's a good shop. So, I mean, I actually picked up the trade of Kraven's Last Hunt after you emailed us all. I think I might have even picked it up at WonderCon a couple of weeks ago. But I read it when it originally came out. I remember that this was kind of like going to be a big deal in the Spider-Man books. I mean, I remember, and it wasn't just in one title. It was like one of those things where at a time where Spider-Man had like something like 4 books, right? Like Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man,
Spider-Man's underpants.
Yeah, exactly. Just like all these. And, it was also at that time where they were just starting to oversaturate the 80s market with, books. Because I think that this was released like mid-80s, correct?
I think I saw 1988 in there.
Yeah, something like that. I mean...
This was the first. I think this was the first time that a writer-artist team took over all 3 Spider-Man books for basically 3 months.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, like it was like they were going. I think there's a little introduction in this trade that I have, and they talked about how they were going to originally just be just going to be an Amazing Spider-Man, and that was it.
Yeah.
Or one of them, but probably Amazing. And then I guess, as they spoke with the editors, they're like you said, like this is kind of something special and seems like a little bit more of a big deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know who came up with the idea, but they said, let's make it, instead of spreading it out for, 6 months or whatever, let's have it happen for like 2 or 3 months across the family of titles.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the first Spider-Man crossover, really, like Spider-Man, like intertitles, the titles within Spider-Man's world.
Yeah.
Spider-Man titles.
Yeah, the Spider-Man line.
Yes.
As they say.
Thank you.
Yeah. But what's interesting is I just remember like the ads and that it was a big deal. And I think one of the things that they were saying was like that Spider-Man was going to die. That was sort of like the big like hook, or that something really bad was going to happen to Spider-Man. And I mean, and it was going to have to do with like Kraven the Hunter. And I just remember thinking as a kid, like, Kraven sucks. You know what I mean? Like, I remember like never really liking Kraven, and him just never, always seeming like, I mean, look at him with the goofy lion's mane vest and the leopard, leopard pants and the zebra belt and the wristbands. I'm looking at a John Romita Sr. Image on the internet right now, and I just remember always thinking he was like a lame villain. So like wondering like, well, what the hell are they gonna do? Like this can't be anything like really great. But yeah, I mean, it turns out to be probably one of the best, Spider-Man stories I think like ever told. And it's not even mostly about Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, it's definitely rated, always rates very high, if not the highest among Spider-Man fans or whatever. Spider-Man himself is actually kind of not there for quite a bit of it.
Yeah. I mean,
at least half of it.
Yeah, I mean, so wait, let's say really quickly who wrote it. It's
J.M. DeMatteis.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, DeMatteis.
From what I understand, it's pronounced J.M. DeMatteis.
Oh, DeMatteis. Okay, and Mike Zeck.
Yeah,
illustrated it, penciled it, and I mean, this hybrid of like writer artist is probably one of the best that I've ever seen. I mean, I remember being a huge Mike Zeck fan in the 80s. Like, he did a lot of Captain America stuff, and I think he did do a little bit of Spider-Man stuff besides this. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember his work sticking out to me on Captain America, and I think maybe he may have even done like Conan titles. I'm not sure. But he's definitely suited for it. Like, I mean, I just remember always being blown. Oh, the one big thing that I remember, he did the big sort of like mid to late 80s Punisher series that was written by Stephen Grant, which is some of the like greatest, which is probably, you know, in my opinion, you know, the greatest Punisher story like ever told. Like, I forget exactly what it's called in trade, but you know, it kicks ass. It's just like a really great Punisher story that they have collected in trade. I'm looking it up right now. Well, they have Punisher, it looks like Circle of Blood. Yeah, that's what they're calling it. Yeah. Punisher Circle of Blood. And that is just like some amazing stuff. So I think that may have come before this, Kraven's Last Hunt. And I think that my exposure to Mike Zeck's art on that is just kind of like what made me a Mike Zeck fan. He's just fantastic. And I mean, he delivers his A game, you know, for this. I mean, big time.
Yeah. I mean, doubt. He I think when I started reading this, I was just expecting like, okay, Spider-Man story.
Yeah.
I wasn't, you know, I mean, it's not the height of literature, but I mean, it's I think it elevates beyond just a Spider-Man story. Like this. Yeah. There's actually some like really interesting craft things going on here, and both the writer and the artist. I mean, they're just. I mean, I guess we can get into it later, but just the way that it's written and the way that the captions are used, and certainly the art and the page and the panel layouts and the symbolism, and it's really good.
Yeah, it's really good. So let's go into a little bit of the plot. I mean, let's take it from the beginning. I mean, you know, I mean, basically this whole thing starts out with sort of Kraven, and he's going through sort of like, I mean, I don't know what's happening with him. Is it like some sort of like weird like vision quest? Is he on drugs in the beginning? Is he, you know, I mean, it starts out, he's like assaulting his menagerie, or like it's like his stuffed animals, his prizes in his home, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. He's in his, you know, I suppose mansion or something. And he's just tearing up the, you know, it's kind of interesting because it looks like he's in a fight with fight with real animals, live animals. But then you realize that, no, these are actually either stuffed animals or just statues or something. Yeah. And which is kind of neat, because that's really only something you could probably do in comics, because if this were like animation or you know, anything moving, it'd be pretty quick. You'd find out with that just that panther is just not moving at all. Yeah. And so it was a neat opener. But yeah, I don't really understand why he's flipping out exactly. Just I think he's maybe midlife crisis. He does mention, you know, he's old, and it just seems like he's kind of at the twilight. He's beaten everybody he could except for Spider-Man, and I think he just feels like you know, he's got to make a drastic move or his life's worthless.
Yeah, well, Kraven was sort of like always like a spin-off of like that old story. I don't know who wrote it off the top of my head, the Most Dangerous Game. You know what I mean? Where the guy gets put on the island, and I can't remember the exact specifics of the story, but I don't know if you've ever read this, but it's a classic, and I read it when I was younger, and it just blew my mind, where they put this guy on an island, and they're like, okay, we're going to hunt man. You know, this is it. Like, we're going to hunt man, this guy on this island. And it's basically this guy trying to survive from, you know, people who are trying to hunt him. And so that was kind of always my take on Kraven, that he was always looking for the next great big challenge. And once he encountered Spider-Man, it's like he developed a huge sort of obsession with him. Correct?
Yeah, I agree.
That was sort of always his thing. And then, like you said, it seems like in the very beginning of this book, he's sort of, you know, ruminating. I mean, it's very to me, it was very reminiscent of The Dark Knight Returns, don't you think?
Yes, I mean definitely inspired by, I would say, or
Yeah.
so,
I almost think the whole thing is very much a reaction to The Dark
yes,
Knight Returns.
I would say.
Because it's definitely a much darker Spider-Man story than what came before it, or like we've ever been used to, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely goes places that Spider-Man books have rarely gone to. I mean, there's like a deep examination of like Kraven and like what his obsessions are and like why he's specifically obsessed with Spider-Man.
And
You know?
what sort of caught my eye too, I thought was so interesting, was that the sort of fall of the Soviet Union seems to be part of it. I
Yeah.
don't remember when. I don't remember the timing, if this would be then or not.
This
But
was before. If it looks like, looking on Wikipedia, it was 87,
oh,
and that's pre the fall of the Berlin Wall. But remember, he is from like turn of the century. I guess he uses like potions to keep himself young
oh,
and
right.
stuff like that.
And he's
So
definitely citing like Trotsky and Lenin and that.
exactly, and he's very much from the aristocracy era, like the czars and stuff like
yeah.
that of Russia. So he ruminates a lot about like how the Russian people were once honorable, and there was honor in his society, and how he had to flee to the United States, and basically scamper around like a wild beast, and how he sees like New York and American society is just beneath him. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Yeah,
And, and I wonder too if maybe because he's been like keeping his body alive through these chemicals, I wonder if he's discovered that it's no longer working, and so that might be the thing too, that it's like he says I will die soon, I must die soon.
Yeah. And I was also wondering too about like whether whatever he was doing to himself was sort of having like a Lazarus pit effect, sort of like Ra's al Ghul, where every time he goes into the pit to like resurrect himself, he gets a little crazier, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, he definitely is pretty imbalanced in here.
Yeah, it's definitely not. What I really like about like the first issue is the thing that they really do is that they establish Spider-Man's character in like one scene, which is in the beginning. There's like, what is it, an informant or some low-level criminal, and he's died, and basically nobody cared about him, nobody loved him, but his friends or his whatever the
business associates.
yeah, his business associates are sort of like having a wake for him at a bar, and Spider-Man shows up and freaks everybody out, but then in the end he's just there to pay for the funeral. Like even though he's Spider-Man, as you and I know, is always broke, always trying to pay the bills for Aunt May. For some reason, he feels like that this guy deserves an honorable or a good burial. And not just like a shallow grave. And he just shows up to pay his respects to somebody who, was, I guess, in a weird way, part of his life. That I found that really, really kind of like heartfelt, and like really showed like, yeah, this is a good guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that definitely does establish instantly that. Yeah, I mean, who would do that? I mean, who would even care for him? Care about him?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, from there you go on to the full on crazy, where like Kraven is what is he doing? Is that actually happening, or do you think he's hallucinating it, where he's like bathing in spiders and then like, eating them?
I assume that's happening. It's pretty gross. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a room full of spiders, and he's like submerging himself into them and sort of like almost bathing in them, right?
Yeah, and just eating them, and that's pretty much what's happening there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember
bizarre.
on the page there, on that second page of that scene, I think I actually went, ew.
Really, it's a really powerfully illustrated scene, though. I mean, this is where you really get to see the power and the strength of Mike Zeck's artwork, because I mean, it's just like, wow, he's into this, like, this is like some crazy time stuff, and then, from there on, the hunt is on, right? He goes after Spider-Man.
But I like what's building along this whole time though is these occasional glimpses at this guy just digging a grave.
Yeah.
Just,
Oh
just
yeah.
every couple pages or something, every other page, at the bottom of the page, just this guy in the rain shoveling away, and it just adds this like impending building doom of, something's not going to go well here.
Yeah, yeah. It's very sort of like gothic, like old sort of like you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
this, this image of a dude like sort of like just digging a grave, and you don't know what it's for. Not really, you know what I mean? And obviously, you're making the assumption that Kraven is up to something and he wants to kill Spider-Man. But of course, you and I as fans, for years and years and years, we're like, oh, he's never going to kill Spider-Man. No one can kill Spider-Man.
Right.
Except, what happens, Corey?
Well, he seemingly does it. And I don't even know if it's clear like how he found him, but
He's hunting him. He's tracking him.
I guess
Corey.
so.
He's the hunter.
He's Kraven the Hunter, so he did his job.
Yeah.
And he just shows up, shoots him with a dart, and then shows up with a shotgun and takes him out.
Yeah, the interesting thing here, though, is that, you start to see that there's something going on with Spider-Man where he's sort of feeling this, like, weird dread coming.
Yeah.
Like that something big is coming and something really terrible. And it's not his spider sense. It's sort of like his, it's just like this foreboding, and he can't shake it. And that's sort of like that something is scaring him, and he doesn't know, like, what this is, almost like sort of like the shadow of death, like crawling over his, his grave. And that's why he gets caught unawares, because otherwise he probably would have been able to dodge this tranquilizer dart that Kraven shoots him with, right?
Yeah, I mean, even the fact that he's out that night is because he had this weird nightmare and he's just feeling weird, like something's not right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like something bad is happening.
Yeah,
So
because he had actually gone home for the night, and then he can't, there's that building dread. And here's kind of the beginning of one of my favorite parts of this whole thing is when Spider-Man's feeling this kind of building dread, the way that the narration captions sort of, he's narrating, and then interspersed is this other voice, like his other part of his consciousness sort of in the back of his head, kind of like something's not right, right. And the way that it's kind of interspersed, I've never seen before, and I thought that was so effective. The way, because it's not like when we're thinking our thoughts, it's just one linear narrative that we're thinking. Like our brains are constantly like shooting in different observations and different, even nonlinear stuff, and so I thought that was just so effective, and I'm surprised not used more often.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I felt like, beyond the artwork, I kept thinking about like how meticulously planned out everything is in all these issues. Not just Zeck's, paneling and his storytelling, but the placement of all the word caption bubbles, not the bubbles, the squares, the dialogue boxes, what I'm saying? The placement of everything is just fantastic. I mean, it's almost an art in and of itself, the sound effects, just everything. I mean, I really do feel that so much of this, the whole run of everything is just flawless, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, the lettering, I don't remember I'm trying to find out who did it.
It looks like letterer was Rick Parker.
Oh, okay, Rick Parker. Yeah, I mean, he definitely deserves a huge credit here because you're absolutely right. It's the way, even the fonts are unique to each character, and
that's right,
distracting. Like there's this sort of typewriter, sort of crazy serial killer typewriter kind of effect going on with Kraven, and then Spider-Man, and then the colors and also the fonts of each character are unique. And then how the duality. I mean, the whole thing is about duality too. The Kraven, the animal versus the man, Spider-Man with the spider versus the man, and then later we'll meet another character who is same thing. It has the sort of animal side versus their human side, and they're all wrestling with it, and that's reflected in the lettering too. How it's the fonts and the color of where it's especially for Spider-Man in this scene, where it's yellow when he's narrating, and then when his subconscious is bugging him, it's red.
Yeah. I mean, that's and that's the thing is like for something like this to be so, for the letterer and penciler and inker. I mean, I'm sure, they all lived around New York City at that time. You kind of had to work at Marvel Comics. But it just seems like they must have all gotten together and just been like, I mean, I'm sure Zeck was the big architect of all these panels and pages, but there had to be like some sort of planning with, the writer and the letterer. I just can't imagine that there wouldn't have been, where they all got together and went like, this word goes here. This is this big. Let's tilt this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in an age where it's like, probably a lot of them were like, I mean, you either had to go into the office or call each other on the phone. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't, display like graphics to one another.
Right. There's definitely no emailing of a snapshot of something.
Exactly. So I mean, just the amount of effort that went into this. I mean, it just seems like it would have been very like hard to do, and you can tell that there's a lot of like really good hard work going on here. So Kraven catches him flat-footed, hits him with a net. Spider-Man's drugged. Now here's the flaw that I kind of found at the end of the first issue, and where I was like, why doesn't Spider-Man, I mean, I know he's freaked out, I know he's drugged, but still he doesn't use his webbing at all, like at all. And to me that's like kind of weird, because to me that's like his webbing's always been secondary, and especially there's a scene here, spoilers for nobody who's never read this, but there's a scene here where Kraven is, he's got the drop on Spider-Man and he's like, I'm going to blow your head off. And he's got a rifle.
I think he really doesn't believe he's going to do it.
Really?
Yeah,
you think
because,
so?
like you said, like Kraven's always been this dopey villain.
Yeah, but well, the other thing too that I read on Wikipedia was apparently Kraven was known for not using weapons. Like he wouldn't even use bows and arrows.
Oh.
He would want to kill somebody with his bare hands. At least that's what the Wikipedia entry says. I mean, I'm not an expert on the character,
Well,
so
if it's on Wikipedia, that's it.
Well, I mean, I could sort of see what you're saying, because
I mean, he even says, Spider-Man even says, "This isn't the Kraven I know." I mean, he's
yeah.
right before
Yeah,
he
so
gets
he's
shot.
gone into full-on panic mode.
Yeah.
But, he does say, like, I'm looking at the page now.
Yeah, and he
He's
does
like-
say, actually, you're right. He says, "You've always wanted to pound me into hamburger with your bare hands."
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
so you're
says that, but then the captions are saying, look at his eyes, and I definitely think Spider-Man thinks that there's something not kosher here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a bit. Yeah, I think a few things are going on. I mean, I think he's drugged and he's stunned, but also the sort of realization and the disbelief of, wait, this isn't right. And I think he's still trying to process, but he's so drugged, he's kind of like, is this really happening? Is this right?
Yeah. Maybe he's sort of in a dream state. Yeah, but for me, I was definitely like, Spider-Man would just web up that, no problem. So I guess if you have to go along with the conceit, it would be that, okay, he's drugged and he's completely panicked and freaked out. You know what I mean?
And he even saw the vision of that guy that he, the Joe Face.
Ned Leeds. Oh no, the other guy. Yeah, Joe Face. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
So I think he's just out of it. I think he's just completely.
Yeah. And so then by the end of the issue, you get Spider-Man seemingly dead, Kraven, burying him like on his estate in a coffin. And so for all intents and purposes, it's like, yeah, Spider-Man's dead, and it's a pretty powerful sequence. I mean, all the way through, especially the last, I would say, bit of that book, the last like 3, 4, 5 pages, that is some pretty awesome storytelling,
Yeah, I love the time that they take with, the last 3 pages are no dialogue, just them burying Spider-Man.
Yep.
And it's just like, it's like you're reading and you're like, okay, he's going to burst out of the coffin.
Yeah.
No, he's not. Okay, he's going to jump out now. Oh, wait, they're putting they're putting the dirt on. Wait, they're still putting the dirt on. It's just like, and then you see that at the last 5 panels or something, you see this little spider on the coffin and he gets buried in the there's a lot of animal symbolism throughout this.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's also interesting to me, too. I mean, have you ever read Straczynski's run of Spider-Man?
And then a little bit, very little.
Well, I mean, do you know anything of it, like where Straczynski basically introduced this concept, which kind of pissed me off, but that there was more of a mystical nature to Spider-Man's origin?
Yeah, I
than,
have
like,
heard of that, the whole sort of spider totem thing.
yeah, the spider totem, and that through the years the spider has picked, different people or different, whatever characters to carry on the mantle of the spider through the years, and that Peter Parker was just the one for this era. And I remember just being like, dude, he's not Green Lantern. Like
Right.
like everything that I loved about Spider-Man, kind of just goes out the window once you sort of like make him an Avenger or, sort of make him part of something else. Like to me, it's always been best when he's been a loner and like his own thing. So to make him part of this like giant legacy, I found disappointing. But rereading this, like I was like, wow, I wonder if Straczynski got a lot of that spider stuff from this book, because there's so much of that, like Kraven, sort of like the spider creature, and you are an evil in the world, and like where basically Kraven's kind of deluded himself to the fact that there's the man, that's Spider-Man, but he's inhabited by a darker being or a larger force. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think the Spider-Man titles were kind of continued to play with this. I don't know. I kind of assume this is the first that is explored in the Spider-Man books, and that would sporadically show up in the Spider-Man books for a few years after. Because I wasn't a hardcore regular Spider-Man reader, but I have some issues where this comes up again, the whole spider versus the man kind of idea.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, this is sort of the first, besides like Straczynski's run, where this is sort of my first sort of recollection of it, because to me, there's never been sort of like, I mean, obviously this could be like Kraven's delusion, right, in this book.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, oh, did Straczynski like go back and look at this and be like, maybe I can pull from this some more mystical meaning to what Spider-Man is,
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, that's a good point. I think you're probably right.
Yeah,
There's some right before and a little bit into the beginning of the clone nonsense in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, I kind of blocked all that out.
Especially right before, there was definitely some of that playing that where he was like, Spider-Man was kind of having a mental breakdown where he was, I don't really remember exactly what was going on, but there's definitely that part of it where at one point he just gives way and he's like, I'm just the spider, the man is gone, and he just and he just gives way to it, and then of course at the end he realizes that's that.
Oh wow! Is the Clone Saga collected like the original one anywhere?
The
like in one giant book?
Yeah, I think the original, like the 70s original.
No, I'm talking about the 90s one that made us all give up Spider-Man
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah, it's in a series of soft covers of it went for a long time, and so
Yeah, it
it's
did.
like 9 volumes or something silly.
Yeah. Well, so at this point, you get to the next issue, which, we're probably not going to have time to go issue by issue at this point. But, I mean, this is when things start to really start moving. You've got Kraven and you've got the grave. Here lies Spider-Man, slain by the hunter. Doesn't even say Kraven. That's a great splash panel, with like a rat sitting on the grave. And then
Foreshadowing the approach of another character.
yeah, exactly. And then you've got standing above Spider-Man's grave is Spider-Man, which is like, what? You're like, huh? And then what you find out is that that's basically Kraven in Spider-Man's costume. And at that point, I'm sort of like, okay, we've entered a whole other level of cuckoo. At this point, the inmates have left the asylum. I don't know what's going on. And I do remember thinking that when I was a kid, like being like, what? Just not being emotionally mature enough to probably process like what the hell was going on. But, this issue sees the introduction of, the Vermin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This underground character. He's pretty much what his name is. He's basically a rat creature, and I guess he kind of controls these sewer rats.
Yeah. He can control rats. So like Aquaman, except with rats.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which isn't really a good selling point, but
No, definitely not. But it's interesting because he is a vicious character, and I sort of do remember him from the Captain America books. I think it might have been an issue or a couple of issues that Spider-Man guest starred in. But he is, I mean, he's gross and he's disgusting and stuff like that. But there is a sympathetic bent to him, right?
yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, he is kind of like kind of a wretch of a character, and he mentions Captain America a lot in this, and again, being what seemed like a crossover, I was kind of like, and I'm sure Captain America is going to show up, and he never does. I mean, I think that's one of the things that really impressed me about this is the really tight cast of it. Like it was it's just these three characters, and then Mary Jane shows up a little bit, but it's mostly these three characters, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a really good sequence too. The whole Mary Jane, well, at least in this particular issue, she's kind of like, it was really interesting. She's worried about Peter because he's been gone for a while. He went out and he didn't come back. And you really do get to see a little bit of that, which they tended to over dramatize later on and turn it into just like a wretched soap opera. But the bits where, I am married to a superhero and I'm worried about him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When he doesn't come home. She's not whiny, but she's worried. You know what I mean? And then you have this sequence where she actually kind of like kills a rat in the apartment, which, if you're a New Yorker, maybe you've had that experience at one point or another, but it's almost weird. It's to me that's almost like her attacking the Vermin.
Yeah.
Because he wants to kill Spider-Man. Like she's sort of protecting like Peter's essence in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so too. And it also kind of is like the reverse mirror of the scene right before it, where the Vermin pulls underground this random woman in the streets and kills her, and then then the next scene immediately is a not quite as helpless woman who kills that rat.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even look at it that way. It's interesting. So at this point, Kraven has put on the costume, and he seems to be descending kind of further into madness.
Yeah.
He's like taking more drugs or whatever it is that he takes, and then he has the hallucination. Like the mother of all hallucinations at this point, in my opinion, where it's like the cage of spiders that he has, they morph into one giant spider.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts to get even crazier. So I mean, yeah, at this point you're seeing him sort of just descend into like where it's almost like unbelievable that a character in a comic could just go this nuts. I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen anything like that before.
And what's interesting is he's won. I mean, he won.
Yeah.
He defeated Spider-Man, and he's now trying to become Spider-Man.
Yeah.
This is not a way to celebrate a victory.
Yeah, no. Well, that's the thing, is that even beyond the grave, he's haunted by Spider-Man. Like he feels like he needs to be better than him. And at this point, it seems like he's starting to develop this idea of, because apparently the Vermin, is the one of the few foes that Spider-Man couldn't beat by himself. He needed Captain America's help. So, Kraven, in his own insanity, decides that the way that he can prove himself better than Spider-Man is to hunt down the Vermin himself, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, that was one of the parts where I was like, oh, okay, sure. I mean, I don't, it's like he just randomly picks this villain out of the blue, but okay, sure.
Yeah. Well, I think also at that time it was just kind of timely, coincidence, because you had the Vermin show up, and they show that he's sort of like, in the 80s, having grown up in that area, you were always hearing in New York there was some slasher or mugger or killer on the street. And I think that they were mirroring that a lot. Oh, and again, I also think that the feel of this kind of calls back to The Dark Knight Returns, which is, when Gotham is kind of descended into darkness and there's no heroes to save them. And, it's kind of like, it's definitely looking at the seedier, unsafe side of New York. And you even see that in this another really great sequence where Mary Jane goes out looking for him in the rain, and basically almost gets into trouble with two guys that she mouths off to, right?
Right.
Who are like being fresh with her. And then this is like an amazing sequence where, you know, Kraven jumps down, kicks the crap out of them, saves Mary Jane, and he's in the Spider-Man costume. And basically she has to stop him from killing them, from going too far, right?
Yeah. And she kind of realizes, wait, that wasn't Peter.
Yeah, I love that. Just that panel, you know, that wasn't Peter. Like that's just fantastic. You know, and then from then on, you know, you've basically Kraven, you know, he's basically taking on the mantle of Spider-Man for the rest of the book.
And what's interesting again in this issue, mirroring those panels of the Gravedigger, you see now on the bottom, you see this rat,
Yeah,
kind of like hanging out in this at the gravesite.
yeah, absolutely. Along with the spider.
Yeah, and then Spider starts that spider that was buried in the end of the last issue. You see him suddenly show up at the.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, Kraven, you know, moving on to part 3, Descent. You know, Kraven's stopping a gang of like hoodlums from stealing something or whatever, and he's kind of having a bit of an identity crisis, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think he thought he was going to fool everybody, and he was going to be, you know, a better Spider-Man, and it's I think he gets completely confused and doesn't understand what's going on himself.
Yeah, because there's a really great illustration here, which is like Mike Zeck all the way, where he's on top of the roof, he's ripped off the Spider-Man mask, and he's like, "I am Kraven." So it's like, do I really want to go this way? Is he tortured with like what he's become, or like what is happening? Like he's gone full on bonkers at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it doesn't seem like he can even make sense of like what he's done in his own head, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so at this point you've got more vermin antics, sort of creepy. He tries to, you know, assault some police officers, or it comes across them by accident. And, you know, you get the sort of, this is like sort of a classic, first of all, the cop being chewed by the rats, like that's just like, ugh.
Yeah,
That's just like, ugh. But this classic panel where it's like, or these two panels where he's got the female police officer on the hood of the police car, and it's basically like, "Mother, I love you," and he just like licks her face, and just this is just like an amazing Mike Zeck illustration.
Yeah.
Where it's just like you can see that she's like terrified for her life, and he's just like, there's no humanity left in this thing anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and totally gross.
Yeah, totally gross. Absolutely. Yeah, so, I mean, the antics sort of continue. Mary Jane goes to Robbie Robertson's house to see maybe if he might know if he's seen Peter, you know, but she can't drop the bomb, you know, that he's Spider-Man.
Yeah, and she considers it, though, but she's like, no.
Yeah, she really thinks about it for a second, but then I guess she's like, in the end, you know, she can't tell him. And just the whole thing, the whole series is just filled with these tension-filled moments where each character is just like dealing with these like horrible things that are going through their heads. It's so well done.
And what's interesting too is that they were newly married at this point of the comic.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
So it's kind of neat to see her kind of navigating like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know, like,
yeah, exactly.
What happens now?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've never had to deal with this before.
Yeah.
You know, and I think to a certain extent, like the way the Mary Jane character had been developed at that point, was basically that, you know, she was afraid of that sort of thing for a long time, you know, even heading into the marriage, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of like marrying a cop or something, you know, like you just don't know what happens when they're out there. And
yeah, but even worse is that you might never, that's what sort of these issues like talk about, is that you might never know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
and that's sort of like the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, by the end of this issue, you've got the final confrontation between, well, not the final confrontation, but the big sort of confrontation between Kraven Spider-Man and, well, Kraven / Spider-Man and Vermin, right?
Yeah, the big, which was a great choreographed scene, a great fight
Freaking
scene.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Just just they're animals, and that's exactly what it looks like.
They go at it. Yeah, there's like biting and stuff like that and scratching, and this is like the thing that Mike Zeck is just freaking amazing at, is just the power. Yeah, I mean the power of the muscles and the way that they're moving and the strength of, like, you can feel the tugging and the pulling and like the ripping, and just like you can see the strength in their bodies. Like, he's so good at that. You know what I mean? And he's just so good at portraying like just like what is just a brutally savage beating. You know what I mean?
And also just the franticness of it. Like, it's not like this is, a lot of times when Spider-Man fights, it's very graceful and everything looks cool. And this is very, they're just grabbing at each other however they can.
Yeah. I mean, it's an all-out brawl. They're not messing around. It's not a gentleman's, boxing or anything like that. This is like to the death. You know what I mean? But by the end, Kraven wins out, right?
Yeah, and also, I mean, just to kind of call back to that scene you pointed out before with the Vermin, and his licking the police woman's face and saying "mother," and then I just noticed this panel with Kraven where he's kind of the final time he's beating Vermin down. He's a dishonored father, sainted mother.
Oh, interesting. Oh man, there's all these really great callbacks. Yeah.
I mean, it's just interesting. It's like a three-way mirror where Spider-Man, Vermin, and Kraven, they're all just reflections of each other.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good call, Corey. That's really, yeah. I mean, the amount of thought that went into this. I mean, it is. There's a reason that it's known for what it's known as being as good as it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this whole sequence here too. I mean, this whole issue is just probably just like, I don't know. It's just, I think this is probably the sort of most powerful set of the bunch. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I really feel like this is kind of where everything starts to turn, and you really don't know where it's going, because at this point you're sort of like, Spider-Man's not coming back.
Yeah, I mean,
until
he's not, this whole issue, he's not even here. It's like, what?
Yeah. And you're like, what's going on? Like, because that's sort of the thing too. I don't know if at this point you had the return of like all these characters, like the way that the modern, Spider-Man comics are. You know what I'm saying? It's like, the modern Marvel universe is where somebody dies and then 2 years later they're back. You know, I don't even think Jean Grey had been brought back at this point. So you were dealing with the Marvel universe and comics that were very different in that you sort of thought that the stakes were like permanent. You sort of thought that, that Marvel played a different game than DC,
Mm-hmm.
where like they were more quote unquote realistic and, gritty or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does seem like it's like, well, I guess Kraven's Spider-Man now. Like that. It's like,
Yeah, it's like really bizarre until you get to the very last panel. And that is creepy as hell, because you've got like all these spiders swarming around the grave, Spider-Man's grave, and the black hand of his costume just pops up, and you've just got that one panel where it's like, Mary Jane, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
and once again, this is following that same format. I know I keep harping on it, but I just love it so much. These little sort of bottom of the page gutter kind of panels that are have their own story going on underneath the larger, like the A story of, we've been watching, just every once in a while we just see this graveyard with more spiders and more spiders and more spiders and more spiders until finally his hand pops up.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a unique way of sequential storytelling where, you've got the normal story happening, and then every once in a while you just see one panel, and then but put them all together. I mean, if you were to like Photoshop this out and put just those panels together, that would be a page. That would be like a sequence.
That's a good point. Yeah, you would have like a really fluid sequence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm looking at it now. I'm flipping through it. Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
or
a good
flip-
point. Yeah, flip book. Yeah, flip book. So at that point, you're like, what's going on? Because am I like dealing with zombie Spider-Man, or like what's happening? Obviously, for us, we're like what 20 years removed, so maybe more at this point. I mean, what if this was 87? Jesus, that's like that makes this storyline what 27 years? No, am I right?
Is that right?
My math sucks. 87, 97, 2007. Yeah, 2014, 27 years.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That is-
Wow. So at this point, you've got Spider-Man, the beginning of the next sequence. He is in the bright light, I guess.
Yeah, he's just in this white, warm, peaceful place.
Yeah.
Uh,
And he's sort of debating if he wants to stay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he's trying to decide if he's supposed to be alive or not. And what's so funny actually is that during the death of Superman, which I read, that when Clark finally comes back, there is an issue very much like this sequence.
Gosh, I don't remember. It's been so long.
Where Clark Kent is talking to his father.
His father,
And,
yeah.
and it's very, very white like this, and very, his father's floating in white space, and he doesn't melt away like creepy in the next page, but there's a lot of this sort of like, abstract, do I follow the white light or not kind of, thing.
Yeah.
And I never knew that was a total and utter ripoff of this.
Well, if you're gonna steal from the best,
That's
right?
true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is definitely one of the freakier sequences in the whole thing, because once he starts sort of realizing that, he's not, that he is sort of dead, or that he's in a place where he might be dead, he sort of metamorphosizes into a spider, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like that spider. Am I the spider or am I the man? And
What
that's
am
exactly
I?
what this
Am
is.
I the beast? What is it? Which part of me is in control?
Yeah.
And then you've got these like really freaky creatures, because he's actually turned into a spider to a certain extent, and they just shred him apart. And then Peter Parker emerges from the dead spider's abdomen.
Yeah.
And that is just like, come on, you're not going to see that in any other comic of the time, I don't think.
Yeah. Definitely not going to see it in Spider-Man 2, I bet.
Yeah, definitely not.
Or Amazing Spider-Man
But
2.
yeah, it's funny because he's fighting to pull himself out from death, but at the same time, it's almost like there's a sequence where it's like Kraven is kind of rooting for him. I mean, obviously, what you start to discover is that he was never killed. He was just put into like a comatose state with whatever drug that Kraven doped him up with, right?
Right.
Yeah. So Kraven has kind of like, what we find out is that Spider-Man was never killed, but just kind of put out of commission so that Kraven could prove himself to whatever, the universe, that he could take Spider-Man's place and do a better job, right?
I mean, I don't know if that's ever made clear. I don't really remember now, but do you think Kraven thought that he had killed him, or do you think I'm sure he knew obviously that the gun, he's shooting him and he's drugging him up, but did he think that by putting him in the coffin and underground that would be it, that he would have died from that?
No, I think that this was like Kraven's plan all along, because even in this particular issue, you see him like slowly pulling off the mask, and he's like, again, this is another sequence where you could lay them back side to side, back to back, and it would be like one continuous sequence of panels, where he's pulling off the mask and he's saying he's out, he's coming, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then Kraven's like, he's coming, and Kraven's got this look on his face where he's like really psyched, because this is it. This is where I get to prove that I'm better than you, or this is where it all comes to a head,
Right, yeah.
And I mean, this panel where this full page splash where Spider-Man pulls himself out of the grave. I mean, that is just come on.
It's like,
Whoever owns that page, they're one lucky SOB. Because that is a beautiful, beautiful work of art right there.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, so Spider-Man revives himself, finds out that he's been gone for 2 weeks in a grave.
Which is crazy.
Which is absolutely crazy. But what I really love is, like, it's such good writing because it's, like, so, like, how Peter Parker deals with it as opposed to... I mean, you just get the sense of his character through the writing right away, where he's just like, I'm not ready for this. This was not cool. I'm going to be sick. You know what I mean? I've been gone for 2 weeks. Whereas Kraven seems to be like just the complete opposite, where he's just like sort of the manly, macho man. I'm here to destroy. I'm here to... And Peter is the complete opposite. As always, he's been us. You know what I mean? How would we react if something like that happens? Like, Spider-Man just doesn't emerge from the grave like sort of like a Batman figure where he's like, I'm going to kick ass and I'm going to take names. He's traumatized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a great point. I mean, it really is like a difficult experience, like which it should be. I mean, and that he really wrestles with how to respond to it. And then these two kind of guards, I guess, or Kraven's helpers or whatever, show up and he considers killing them. He's like that.
Yeah.
And he can see it in their eyes that they think that he's going to. And he's like, I kind of want to, but it's a small part that wants to. And so he maintains his, who he is.
Yeah. Well, there's that great line, I'll find Kraven, I'll deal with him, but not like a spider, And what I really love about this sequence again, and it's sort of one of the tragedies of the Spider-Man Mary Jane marriage, that they never figured out how to write them like a real couple. You know what I mean? Like how a real couple would sort of interact. I don't think that a married couple in comics has to be boring. I mean, you look at something like the Thin Man, series of movies, you can make it work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, what I really love about this is that he's in Kraven's lair. He's on his stomping grounds, but the first thing he does is he goes to see Mary Jane.
Yeah.
Which is what you would do.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that to me even shows you more of Spider-Man's humanity, what makes him such a really great character, because he's like us. He wants to be comforted. He wants to go home and see the people that he loves more than anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no posturing with him,
Yeah, he's worried about her, and he's not afraid to show it and to admit it.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I've always loved about like old Spider-Man, and that's sort of why I gave up on him during the McFarlane years, because, like I just said, there's no posturing, there's no pretending, there's no BS. It's just like he's a dude and he's just a regular dude, and there's no like puffing out of the chest with Spider-Man.
Right.
He's vulnerable, he's weak, and he can admit it, and he can see that in himself, So I mean, this is just like a really great sequence, and then he decides to like that this is it, I've got to go,
Yep.
And Mary Jane's kind of trying to talk him out of it, but he's like, I can't, I've got to go confront him, right?
Yeah, and there's even, just more of what you're talking about, like their relationship and sort of that tenderness of him. There's even that sort of 3-panel sequence where he's like, she's like, you're going? And he's like, I'm going. And then he sort of takes her hand and kind of puts it to his face. It's like,
Yeah.
It's not like he's just like the brooding male of,
Exactly.
I'm out of here.
See you later, baby. Yeah.
Although,
I got to go take care of business.
Although I hope he ate. I mean, 2 weeks, and it's like...
Yeah. I think maybe he took some time to get a snack or something. Maybe he got a dirty water dog out on the street on the way there. But, yeah, I mean, he heads straight to Kraven's, and the last panel is like... Again, fantastic. There's Kraven and Spider-Man behind him,
Yep.
and Kraven's like, he's here. And, and deep down inside, all the comic fans went, it's on, baby! It's like, holy cow, like, here we go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then this chapter 5, Thunder, you've basically got, this is it. This is the big confrontation. Like, Spider-Man tracks him down and then starts to beat him up, and Kraven's like, I'm not going to fight you, which is just like, what?
Yeah.
Because it goes against all expectations, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're expecting the big slug out, and then he's just like, nope,
What did you think? Because I mean, you're new to it. Like, what were you expecting? Were you expecting that? Like, I'm like Spider-Man to just go kick ass?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just expecting the big fight, and yeah, he's just like, even, a couple pages in where he puts his hands up and his face is even like he's so like it's like a soft expression,
Yeah.
and he's I thought it was a great move that he won. It's like I drove you crazy, and it was never about defeating him in battle. It was outwitting him,
Yeah.
and that's what the victory was. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, I thought that was a great turn and a great sort of a twist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was about traumatizing him.
Yeah,
It was about taking away, showing him who the master could be. You know what I mean? Yeah, but then at this point, you sort of get back into that where Kraven sort of really does have to sort of prove that he's better than Spider-Man, and he leads him down to where he's captured Vermin, and again, you've got this sort of sequence where, Kraven's like, I defeated him. You couldn't, and now I want you to fight him. And Spider-Man's like, I'm not going to fight for you, right?
yeah, yeah, and again, Vermin is just like this pathetic thing, where it's like he did murder somebody in the a few issues ago, but you do feel bad for him because he's being so manipulated, and so he's scared, and then that fear is kind of twisted into lashing out.
Yeah, and he's also he's a victim of being experimented on, you know.
Right.
He was probably a regular guy at one point and was turned into a monster. But this is sort of the brilliant stroke because Kraven's like, Vermin doesn't know that Kraven is the one that kidnapped him. Vermin still thinks that Spider-Man's the one that hurt him and kidnapped him. So this is like the brilliant thing that Kraven pulls off, which is like, look, Spider-Man's here. I've set you free. Now it's time for you to hurt him. And so, of course, you've got this creature coming at you with claws, and Spider-Man at first starts to like dodge him, but then finally gets nailed and then loses his temper, right?
Yeah. He's like, okay.
He's like, okay. But that's the thing is like, that's the brilliance of the plan, right? Like that's where Kraven is so smart because Kraven, puts him in a place where he has to fight back.
Right.
It's not about like, I'm not going to fight for you. This isn't for your amusement. It's no, there's this hairy dude coming at me with sharper claws than Wolverine, and he's going to tear me apart. Right.
Yeah. And at the same time too, it's intercutting with this a spider and a rat.
Yeah.
The spider the rat just crushes the spider.
Yeah. And Vermin actually kind of wins out, escapes.
Yeah.
But also because it shows you the difference between Spider-Man and Kraven. He's not really into the fight. He doesn't want to hurt him.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is even to the point where he's going to be almost, disemboweled. Spider-Man's like, no, I'm not going to hurt you, which again has always been the strength of his character.
Yeah, and I like too. He's like, you can't just let him go. He's killed, but it's like,
Yeah. And then so Kraven basically at the end is like, this is it. Like I proved it. I did what I set out to do, and now it's over. And I don't even think. I mean, Spider-Man obviously is like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't even know that I completely understand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting where it's like he's just like, yeah, he's even like, I will never hunt again. Like I got everything I needed. I'm all set. You can go now.
Yeah, and Spider-Man's like, what do you think? I'm just gonna like let you go? You buried me. You took away 2 weeks of my life. And then Kraven basically makes that promise. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna bother you again. Like this is it. Kraven's not gonna hunt again. But what we really don't know is that what Kraven plans to do is. What does he plan to do, Corey?
Bake a cake to celebrate the big party. No, he takes out the same rifle that he used to shoot Spider-Man, and he just says goodbye to his mother, and says goodbye to the world, and that's the end of him.
Yeah, he blows his own head off. Yeah, which is a crazy, crazy, and just that last splash page with the blood dripping down the picture of him as a little boy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yep.
these guys knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, this is just, they knew what they were doing when I was reading it. So finally we get to the last part. Been talking about this for a long time. It's good. We can wrap it up. But let me tell you, this sequence where Spider-Man at this point is going down into the sewers to hunt the vermin, and he's uncomfortable. He doesn't like being underground because it reminds him of being buried, and he's freaking out. You know what this reminds me of? You know that famous panel of Spider-Man that Stan Lee is always talking about, where he's stuck under the machinery?
Yeah.
And like Steve Ditko, and like he's like, I can't escape, I can't. And then finally, sort of by the end of that sequence, he's like, I have to do it for Aunt May and for all my friends,
Yeah.
And he like lifts it. This is what that reminded me of. I think that this is a real callback to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're really right. And it is such the dirt, and it's just so grimy and claustrophobic, and but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go back to that.
Yeah. I mean, and it really, really shows you, again, the strength of Peter Parker's character, because he's like, again and again, he just keeps saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here, but again, it's like, I have to finish this, and not in a macho way, in a, like, I have a responsibility. This is my duty. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the little parenthetical, I'm not dead. I'm not dead.
Yeah. He just keeps saying it to remind himself that he's not dead, that this isn't some crazy dream, and, from then on in, you do build up to the fight, sort of like the big fight between him and Vermin. And at this point, he finally decides to use his webbing.
Yeah. He remembers.
Yeah.
For
Which I was
6
just
issues.
like, yeah, exactly. 6 issues later, he never uses his webbing. I was just like, come on. So, but finally he did. And there's a really interesting, great character moment where, Spider-Man's trying to convince Vermin that it wasn't him that went after him, that it was Kraven dressed as him. And Spider-Man loses patience and smacks him in the mouth. And he's like, why did I do that? And that to me is so like another really human faulty moment where it's just like, yeah, he lost his temper, and then immediately he's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was so mean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, both of the characters have been through so much, and the Vermin is just like just rambling, and paranoid and confused and, not very intelligent and just doesn't understand what's going on. And Spider-Man's like trying to explain to him. And, I mean, he could just take his mask off, but of course, he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So he's like, he doesn't know what else to do. And they've been fighting for so long. So the punching is what they've been doing. So that's what he does.
Yeah. But in the end, Spider-Man kind of tricks him, Vermin, into going above ground. And, at that point, it's daylight, and Vermin can't stand the daylight. So he's all freaked out, and Spider-Man's able to subdue him and turn him over to the cops. And here's a really great sequence again where Spider-Man swings off and the cops are talking about him, and it turns out that everyone in the city and the world knows what happened to him because Kraven left a confession behind when he blew his own head off.
Right, so the crazy Spider-Man that had been running around, they knew now that was not really Spider-Man.
Yeah. But the cops here, it's great. It's like, heck of a thing, huh? After all he's been through, all Kraven did to him, he still got it in him to look out for this murdering beast. I mean, that says it right there, and that to me says it like, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and the first Captain America movie, and Man of Steel, not at all. This is the reason why I got into these characters. You know what I mean? Because there is sort of like this good gold streak of like, I'm the good guy and I'm going to do what's right. And at the end, it sort of is that like it does sort of return him a bit to the status quo of what he was, Yeah. And that's, and you're absolutely right, because when you just look at the sort of the color palette of when Vermin goes from the sewers up into the streets,
it's the
Yeah.
brightest scene we have had for 6 issues.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it goes back to, and by the time Peter runs back home and hugs Mary Jane, and it's like we're back into the classic Spider-Man that you remember. So
Yeah.
you're right, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Like the status quo is returned, and it's like even the colors, it looks like Spider-Man that we've been reading for,
Yeah.
before then.
Yeah. And then the final bit is Kraven's henchmen, solemnly digging up his grave, very much like they did to Spider-Man in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and, just burying him. And that's the end, a rat and a spider crawl into the grave with him, and that's it, and that's the finale, which is extremely powerful, especially after reading it all in one volume. Like a trade, you didn't have to wait month after month. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
But
It feels very it races when you've got them all together like this.
yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because I really feel like this is one of those things that you could read that you didn't need to know much of anything about Spider-Man.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? Like if you had seen the movie, one of the movies or some of the movies, you would probably be like, what the hell is this? Because there's so much kind of like crazy out of the box stuff. But at the same time, I think it's something that anyone could enjoy as long as they're willing to sort of like explore maybe the darker places of Spider-Man. I mean, I don't think there's anything like really inappropriate in it, but it's very mature, right?
Yeah, it's definitely very intense I mean, do you remember how old you were when you originally read it?
Well, if this was 87, I probably would have been like a sophomore in high school.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think I was mature enough to understand, all that stuff. But the power of it definitely got to me.
Yeah,
And,
I think you could. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, yeah, you could read it younger and still enjoy it. But
yeah,
I think if you're older, I think you see more of what we've been talking about the symbolism and the layers and the sort of the imagery that's going on and sort of the deeper stuff. So I think it can be
yeah,
enjoyed on a few different levels. And
yeah,
you're right. It stands alone. I mean, it's again, took place in 1987, but it's the only bit of continuity is that Mary Jane and Peter Parker are married.
yeah,
That's really it.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too because I think when you emailed us, I think that the Spider-Man books in general, when you emailed us when you first read this and you were like, "Oh, I just read this for the first time. It was amazing," and I think I responded because there was a storyline going through the Spectacular Spider-Man where it was like this guy called the Sin Eater, and he was a dude with a shotgun who was murdering people in New York, and Spider-Man was on his trail, and that sort of happened at around the exact same time as this. So this was definitely sort of like a darker period for Spider-Man in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was definitely a little less of the happy-go-lucky Spider-Man. And I think at this point, all of comics were sort of like heading in that direction because of Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
I mean, there's no the jokester Spider-Man is not really here at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all.
And yeah,
No.
you're right. Yeah, it would be interesting to have read it within the context of the rest of comics at the time.
Yeah.
Having sort of the luxury of reading it now, where the industry's somewhat gotten it over that sort of grim and gritty kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it may read better because it reads more as something fresh, which sounds weird because it was sort of responding to something that was from the 80s.
Yeah.
But I think it holds up. I mean, I think even though obviously stylistically it was kind of it sort of got permission to do things because of the Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen and other things like that. I think it really holds up nicely. I think it's sort of a solid. It's like a solid singular kind of story for Spider-Man, but just for because it's exploring the Kraven and the Vermin and just those dynamics of their psychoses. It's sort of is a pretty cool story on its own.
Yeah. I have to say it's really funny too that it's like one of these essential Spider-Man stories because it's one of these things that you don't go to Spider-Man 4,
Yeah.
like right out the bat. Usually you're going to Spider-Man for like hijinks and like, really fun adventure. Like you said, like the quips, the funny stuff, sort of like the soap opera aspect. And there's none of that here.
Yeah.
This is like taking Spider-Man into a whole other direction. And while I think it's a really interesting experiment, I think it really did affect the way the Spider-Man books went after that, and added a sort of darkness to it, which kind of took away a little bit from the Spider-Man character from then on in for a long time,
Yeah, I think superhero comics in general tend to kind of glom onto something that is really special and then don't always understand what made it so special and try and mimic it.
Yeah. They kill the golden goose. They basically
Yeah.
feed on their own. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Without really understanding why it worked, and
Yeah,
that certainly happened with like things like Watchmen and Dark Knight and
Oh, absolutely.
this, and so it's
Yeah.
definitely true that the Spider-Man books were kind of, it's like we mentioned in that last or that sort of second to last scene, things are bright again, and Spider-Man kind of returns to the world that we are more familiar with.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it was meant to kind of forever alter his world. I think it was supposed to be like, you're out, you're back into daylight, you made it,
Yeah.
you survived.
Yeah. Well, I do remember them being some repercussions like down the line, like a little bit of trauma that he had to deal with, but I don't know that they ever went fully like that he had to, maybe for a little while. But you should probably pick up. I think I saw it at WonderCon. The trade is called "The Death of Jean DeWolf," and I think that's the Sin Eater arc.
Oh, okay.
And you should definitely see if you can find that, because it's not as good as this, but it's sort of around the same era, and you'll be able to see like what they were kind of trying to do with Spider-Man at the time. And it's like, maybe we didn't need to go that crazy with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it gets very dark, especially because of the dark costume. What I kept trying to remember is if this costume was the symbiote or not.
Yeah, I think it would have been, because he got it from Secret Wars, and I guess that's the other bit of continuity that this book has, is why is Spider-Man in a black costume.
Yeah.
But
but if it was the symbiote, don't you think the symbiote would have worked to protect him at some point during this?
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I mean, it probably hadn't been revealed as such.
I don't remember when he discovered that, and then I can't remember. I feel like he wore a duplicate, like he made his own.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And so I don't remember like when that, the order and when that happened. So
I think for a while, like after he figured out the symbiote, I think he did make like a regular cloth costume, so it could have been that too. Yeah. Cool. Well, any other thoughts on Kraven's Last Hunt, or you think we've pretty much covered it in an hour and a half that we've been talking?
Well, I think we need to do hour 2. Now, the last thing I want to say is that with so that last scene, or that one of those last scenes where he commits suicide, I do know that in the last, I want to say 5 years, there was a Spider-Man story that kind of did follow up with the Kraven story, and I've heard that it's pretty good.
Oh, really?
But I was wondering, because if it's the same gun that he used to shoot Spider-Man, wouldn't it be just drugs?
Yeah, but he blew his head off. I mean, I don't know. It looks like a gun that you could load bullets, or, that's the thing, is I know several years ago, I mean, beyond maybe even what you're talking about, they brought Kraven back.
Oh, they did.
And everyone was pissed.
Yeah.
Like, people were angry. I was angry too, because I was like, that's an amazing story. Why would you bring him back? Just leave it alone. And I think it was either Bill Hamas or Joe Quesada was like, well, you never really saw the body.
Yeah.
You never really saw his face, which you kind of don't, but I'm like, that's lame.
Yeah, I would obviously rather he stay dead, but it does seem it's just interesting, because he purposefully uses the same rifle that he used to kill Spider-Man, and so and then the same exact sort of ceremonial burial that he gave Spider-Man, he gets turns out to have been a fake, and so there is wiggle room.
There is wiggle room, but I don't know. And what's interesting, too, is that how this character, Kraven, was, I think, really not one of the most respected villains.
Right.
In Spider-Man, he wasn't like one of the rogues gallery, like when he showed up, you were like excited, like the Green Goblin,
Right.
or, you know, Dr. Octopus or something like that. I think he was like very much a B villain, but after this, it was like
Oh, yeah.
just these 6 issues alone just like cemented his place in Spider-Man history. I mean, no one can ever talk about Kraven the Hunter, you know, or Spider-Man's villains without bringing up this book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, it was that powerful. So cool. All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up Kraven's Last Hunt. This will be our last word on it. Thanks for doing this, Corey.
Thank you.
It was great talking to you about it. Maybe next time we can get more of the guys to talk about another book. But
Yeah.
I guess this has sort of been the first part-time fanboy book club.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm Kristian Horn, and I'm here with my friend Corey Blake. And hopefully next week we'll be back with Godzilla. Are you going to go see Godzilla, Corey? You're going to go see it, right?
I've never been a huge Godzilla fan.
Oh, come on.
I mean,
First in line.
oh yeah.
Well, I've got a kid, so
Oh, right.
I'm going to see it whenever I get a chance to see it that weekend. But that's what I want to talk about next weekend. So hopefully, if you do choose to see it, we can all join in and talk about, Gojira.
if I see it, I will be there.
Cool, awesome. Well, thanks for listening to Part-Time Fanboy, and hopefully we'll see you or talk to you again next week. Bye.
Part-time fanboy.
Part-time fanboy doing my thing.
Oh yeah, doing part-time. Oh yeah, doing part-time. Oh yeah, doing part-time. Oh yeah, doing part-time. Part-time fanboy.